I call a special city council meeting for the city of Tomball, Texas to order. We will dispense with the opening ceremonies and go right to public comments and receipt of petitions. This time, anyone who would be allowed to speak on any matter other than personnel matters or matters under litigation for a length of time not to exceed 3 minutes. No council board discussion or action may take place on a matter until such matter has been placed on the agenda and posted in accordance with the law. Doris, do we have anyone who wants to speak for more than 3 minutes?
I have no one signed up.
Okay.
Budget.
Okay. All right, then we will close the public comment and period and go straight to, we are now going to enter into the workshop session to consider the proposed fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. And I will call up David Escobar to begin.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. This is our first scheduled budget. Hopefully we can get through all of the content that we have scheduled for today, and then for the second budget meeting, finish up with the remaining items. There will be time between that second budget, if we need a third budget, and then before we have to advertise in September for the adoption. Moving forward, we cannot put this document together without the help with a lot of folks. I'll tell you that it is a little bit intimidating to present a budget to a seasoned council, and then having 2 CPAs on the council adds that extra bit of factor there. However, I do have secret weapons, and my secret weapons are obviously Jessica and Catherine. They've been great throughout this whole process, and including the budget team, which includes Kristen and all the department and staff, because they do have to provide a lot of input in their insight on the how we move forward in each individual departments. Just to give you an outline about what we're going to be discussing today, this first budget meeting, we're going to go over, we'd like to give you an overview of just the budget itself, the process that we go through, and then go through current year, which is the 22 or FY22 budget, because that really is where we start for the proposed budget for next year. And then obviously go into the 23 proposed budget. And for this first workshop, we're going to try to get through all of the general fund, enterprise fund, and then the debt service, because there are major things going on or proposed for those things. The second workshop, we're going to finish up with the capital projects and then those special revenue funds. So going right into the overview of the budget. So what is the budget? The budget is really a plan, a financial plan that we utilize to kind of lay out what we project needed to happen for the upcoming year. So that includes the base operations that we have and any additional things that is requested for each department in order for us to operate. It has all of the items for capital and supplementals and things like that's in there. So it really is what's the word I'm looking for? It's an appropriation of funds. So it's not necessarily going to guarantee that that's the expenditure of the funds. It is our best look, our best educated guess on what we're going to be doing or how we're going to spend the funds. The budget is comprised of these fund types. We break up the budget in these 3 major categories: governmental, proprietary, and internal service funds. As you can see, the governmental funds does consist of our general fund and special revenue funds, debt service, capital, and then you have your impact fees, and that's where they go into the water capital recovery and the sewer capital recovery. So the governmental funds, the way they get their revenues is primarily through taxes and fees. And so those are grouped in there, and there's specific rules governed for each of these funds on how we're supposed to spend it. The most flexible one that we have is the general fund. Then you go into the proprietary funds, and that really is the enterprise fund, which is our water, sewer, and gas. Those operations are funded solely by the rates. So your water rates, sewer, and gas rates go into the operations to pay for that, which includes any debt that is issued for the enterprise fund. And then the internal service funds, those funds are created internally. So you'll have transfers between the governmental funds over to the internal service funds, and the same thing for the proprietary funds. And those are for your fleet replacement and your health trust. So that really stabilizes those two large expenditures to make sure we don't have any interruption in that service. The timeline for the budget, it really does continue on all year long. And so what you'll see there is you'll see that there's those different pieces, but they all play into the budget process. Going into the budget process itself, the departments really start about March, and they start looking at all of their current expenditures. They project at that point the best they can about what the expenditure is going to look like. And then they start inputting that in their budget. We start scheduling some of those meetings. They start working on their base budget, what their needs are going to be. And then they start working on gathering all the quotes and all of the information they need to put together their request for the upcoming year in the form of supplementals. The supplementals are usually those new things that are added. So it's a new service, new piece of equipment, vehicle, those types of things that is requested that is not in the base budget. And then about May, we meet with all the departments to go over their initial projections, their base budgets, and then their supplemental requests. Then we as a budget team meet together and around the June timeframe to go over those. We go through several iterations to refine the process to meet what we need and then balance out the revenues and those different expenditures. By about July is where we're at now today. We finish up the proposed budget. We set up the meetings to meet with you, the council. And then by about August, we are going to finish up all of the budget workshops. Okay? And then in September, we start the budget adoption process, but it still gives us between the first part of August to September for any questions and any things that we need to adjust before we go actually and put the public hearings for the adoption. And of course, and then in October, the new budget will then begin. So here's the dates of the upcoming process for the budget. Second workshop is going to be the next council meeting. And then the public hearing, as we stated before, is it starts in September. So there's still time between it to have a third workshop or for any questions and any revisions that need to happen. So going into the current year, and so where we're at with our current year budget. Revenue projections are significantly more than what we had previously or at the beginning of the year started out to be. A lot of that has to deal with those items that we listed there. Property tax valuations continue to grow and increase. Sales tax, we're seeing historic collections. I mean, these collections that we've had, we've never seen before in the history of Tomball. So those sales tax continue to be very strong. Gas and water taps, because of new development, continue to go really, really strong. Water sales, because of the drought conditions that we're seeing, those sales are going to be higher than what we budgeted. We budget always for a mild weather for gas and for water to make sure that we're conservative on those projections. And again, growth does affect our water sales. Building permits and inspections are continue to grow at a very strong pace and largely due because of new development. Expenditures did exceed our projections for 22, and it's a lot of it has to do with rising costs and inflation, the supply chain considerations. So if you, as you know, we had or brought to council for your consideration to approve out of budget purchases. A lot of that was to kind of get ahead of the supply chain issues that we deal with. So the new mini pumper, the patrol cars, and things like that added to that out of budget expense. New development, those costs for new development, while it does bring in high revenues, the expenditures for buying the meters and all of the equipment that's needed for that did go up. So that added to that amount. I added that last bullet because I do anticipate, again, there's nothing that I've heard yet. I have a question out to TCAP to see if they're anticipating another ancillary charge. But if you remember from the winter storm, we got hit because of the storm electrical charges. So the way ERCOT will do is at that time in the winter storm, they called up backup power, and that power is more costly. So that ERCOT pays for that, and it's recovered through the ancillary charges through all of its customers. The way I understand we're handling this heat wave and the pressures on the grid, ERCOT has bought a lot of backup power to make sure there's enough supply that we can meet the demands. So with that, I'm anticipating that we will get hit with ancillary charges to pay for all of that backup power that they're purchasing right now. All departments have submitted their projections for this current year, and so we've refined a lot of those projections and added. I will tell you that a lot of the projections for the enterprise fund for the water sales, this drought has come at the very last minute. So some of those even I think will exceed what we projected so far right now. Even with the growth of expenditures, we're still going to end this current year in surplus, about $2 million worth of surplus, and fund balances at the end of this current year, we're going to look at 90% for the general fund. The enterprise fund is projected to end at about $155,000 in deficit because of the revenues compared to expenditures. However, I think because of the drought and those water sales, I do believe that that number is going to be a lot better, if not end up on the positive. With that deficit, we still have a healthy fund balance of 70% at the end of this fiscal year. The hot funds, it is projected to have an $85,000 deficit. However, if you remember from last year's budget, we did plan to replace a lot of lost revenue because of the COVID 2 years or 3 years of that. With the ARP funds, we have not done that. So basically on its own, it's been able to make, or the revenues to cover up to with just $85,000 of deficit. Even with that deficit, our projected fund balance for the hot fund is 76%, which if you remember before, it was going to be very, very, very low. So overall, the FY22 ending projection we are still in a very, very strong financial position.
David, on the enterprise fund and the grant that we've got that we're replacing meters with, does that ever come into play, and where do you show that grant? We've got the money from the federal government and we're using it to buy meters, right?
Yes. So that was an additional above and beyond the budgeted expense.
Right. Yeah, we're accounting for the ARP funds in a separate grant
Okay.
fund, so it doesn't actually, it's not reflected in the.
Okay.
So that is not part of the deficit on the meters.
Correct.
That was my question.
That's over and above.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, mark that.
Because you remember when we can ask for the meters, it was to complete the conversion. This, what's in the budget, it's all new meters. So it's all the meters that we had to buy for new development.
Okay.
So kind of give you the overview of the 23 budget. So this is the proposed budget. So this proposed budget still maintains strong reserves, even though that because of the immediate needs, we are recommending to expend a lot of some of the fund balance for those one-time purchases. The budgeted expenditures, including capital projects, is a total of $98 million. Year-end projected fund balance for all of it is about $56 million. In this upcoming budget, we're looking at, so this, we wanted to kind of focus on a little bit on personnel. It included in the proposed budget is a 3% COLA. We looked up the 12-month CPI. So basically for this region, 12 months ago to now, that increase in cost is about 9.1%. So the COLA that we're proposing is a modest request. Salary survey adjustments. You did approve a salary adjustments after we did a comparison to our comparable cities and did adopt a salary survey adjustment at that time. Typically, those are done 3 to 5 years before we go back Because of the increase in the CPI and the competitive market in the job market that we find ourselves today, we looked at those numbers again, and in order to help us not fall too far behind, this budget does recommend a salary survey adjustment. So that is included in the budget. Very, very small, almost insignificant amount of increase for our retirement system of 0.14%. As we talked about before, this budget does include 27.5 positions of new positions in this budget. So the breakdown there in PD, we got 6.5. It's funded through the general fund and the contract with the ISD. Fire 9 positions, and that's totally funded with the ESD contract that we have. Public Works, we've got 6 in general fund, 4 in enterprise. Utility billing, one of those, it's a customer service rep that to handle a lot of the traffic that we're seeing in the enterprise fund. And in engineering and planning, we do have 1 position, and that position is an assistant city engineer. We are still vacant on our city engineer position. That is a critical position when we do plan reviews and a lot of the questions that we have internally. So to have that, to shore up that need, if we have this vacancy, then that's why we included that position. Priorities there, just kind of the highlights of the major items in these different departments. PD, we are addressing the evidence storage lot. If you don't know where that's at, our storage lot is on Malone Street next to the old city pool, where we have also the fire department training center, that house there. There's a significant amount of improvements that need to happen in order for us to secure the evidence storage properly and to ensure that we have accuracy of our things and people going in and out. We want to upgrade how that's tracked and done. We add 2 patrols to meet the coverage, the heights of those coverage areas. Jailers, we're adding 2 jailers, so that way we'll have a jailer on shift for every of the shifts. Improved bailiff coverage. So right now what we have is 1 bailiff full-time. Our municipal courts aren't full-time throughout the whole week, so we believe we can cover appropriately with 2 part-time bailiffs and then move that current full-time into patrol to help out there. And of course, as you know, we have additional SROs in the budget. Fire department, we're adding for station 4. We removed the request for the mini pumper. Council approved that for this current year. Infrastructure, we're looking at the 2920 lift station because of all of the demands out there on that side of town. Tailgate easement acquisition to take advantage of the project that the county is undergoing through right now. South wastewater treatment plant, that capacity is anticipated, especially if we get the amount of growth that we're projecting, that we could hit that trigger or that threshold that we'll have to start the design. So we're anticipating to go ahead and start the design now. It rehabs the Pine Street elevated tank. So that's that tank here on James Street. That needs to be recoated and some upgrades for TCQ requirements. And then it funds the half of the construction for the elevated storage tank at Levitt, or the Grand Parkway elevated storage tank. This also does look and address the water supply. So we're looking at doing phase 1. So basically what this is starts the design and easement acquisition for a new well plant or water plant to shore up our water supply. Upgrades to South Persimmon water line, and also for Rudolph Road for water and wastewater line extensions.
David, I know that Councilman Stoll has brought it to your attention, I believe I did last year, about the Baker Street tank needing to be cleaned up.
Yes, sir.
Is that included in this?
It is included in the base budget.
Okay.
And so there wasn't an additional anticipated high that we didn't have to pull it out into a capital.
David, Rudolph Road, the water and the wastewater line extension, does that also take into consideration, the EDC years ago funded monies for that project? Is that still viable from them?
Those funds, I believe, we did see that. I don't believe that they're allocated anymore. So that was a reimbursement, and so that never got done, so that allocation never came through. But I do remember seeing that at one point it was approved. And so it would just mean that if we'd want them to fund it, we'd have to go back and just request.
Okay.
A big area that this budget does address is our planning side. As we've talked about, updates to the comprehensive land use plan and major thoroughfare plan are included or budgeted in this budget. Along that, as soon as that gets done, then zoning ordinance updates can then happen. That is also proposed in this budget. In order to completely finish our total look as a city as a whole and all the needs that we have, and then to program appropriately a capital plan, then we do recommend completing a parks master plan that could affect our facility needs assessments. A drainage master plan, that is a large cost. So as you know that we do have a plan to extend major conveyance, which is our channels, M121, M118, M124 really is a county and flood control one. But however, we need to get all of our little drainage areas within the city to drain into these conveyances. And so this is what the drainage master plan will really lay out those plans and identify those CIP projects in order to get all of that completed. And as we talked about before, their facility needs, this does fund the next phase, which is any feasibility assessments that we need to do of potential sites. It looks at different options for you to consider in order as we move forward for the needs of the facilities, so that this funds that next phase of the facility needs. And then to make sure that we are healthy as we move forward in the enterprise fund, that is, we talked about before, is funded strictly with utility rates. So the utility rate study will really narrow down to make sure that our rates are at a level that is needed in order to continue a strong fund. What I'd anticipate looking at with the utility rate study is to look at our structure as a whole. We do not have necessarily a structure that, for example, that promotes water conservation. So the more water you use, that price does not escalate. So I want to be able to bring to you some options on a rate structure that really fits our needs, so that we're not overburdening one class of ratepayers with just a flat kind of across the board rate. So an update to that rate study is included in this budget. Kind of give you some overview snapshots. As you remember, the funds or the budget is broken into these funds. The FY23 budget, as you see there, and there's a lot of numbers and it's in your budget book, but however, I just want to show you that's how we come up with the $98 million. Those are the different funds, and each individual fund that's contributes to that $98 million of expenditure. And then the other thing I'd point or have you look at is going to be the ending fund balance for each of those funds. When you look at your budget book and you see where we're at projected for current year and then years in the past, that is a number that we watch closely to make sure that we're trending in the right direction.
Why is there a $3 million difference between what we have in our books and what's showing up there?
Good question. Catherine?
It's been updated. I have a new copy for your book.
Thank you.
So basically what it is, and as you know, we put these budgets together using Excel. And so it was I
That's
think
why we're
missed
proposing
it.
budget software.
Right, that's one of the things in there. So it didn't catch one of the cells, and so we caught it. Here's in the graph form. I do like graphs. As you know, I don't like to read very much, but I do like numbers, but I like graphs. I like pictures and that kind of thing. So this is in graph form. And I think what this shows you, if you look at the FY23, which is in the far right-hand corner, that very top piece, that the yellow or gold portion is the one-time expenditures proposed in this budget, which then it shows you that while our expenditures are more than our projected revenues, a lot of that is a one-time expenditure that does use portion of our reserves or fund balance. Graphically, here's our expenditure citywide. As anticipated, a lot of it is our operations and versus our personnel. Public Works continues to be the biggest pie there with the general fund and enterprise fund. Those together is about 45% of the entire budget. This does not include any of the capital items. So this truly is your base budget that you're looking at here and how it's divided up. Public safety is 28%. So it gives you kind of an idea about where all of the funds go, in which departments are utilized. So focusing in general fund. Any questions on just the overviews?
I had one on your utility rate on the, so it's planned to reward people if they conserve water in the rates. And it said.
The
utility rate
conservation model would be
model.
that it's not necessarily reward, it's charge additional if you choose to utilize more water than someone else, then you should pay a little bit more because your impact to supply and the operations is more. So that helps prevent the single widower that's on a fixed income paying a flat rate that somebody with a large family and has a lot of irrigation utilization, their tiered rate, if they're using more gallons or thousands of gallons per month, then their rate's going to be a little bit higher than the base rate paid.
Okay,
So that would hopefully promote conservation by capping those high water users.
people want to set their sprinklers right down the water, flood the ditch. So, okay,
Yes, exactly.
thank you.
So now looking and focusing only on the general fund, the current year projections there, as we talked about, the revenues are exceeding original budget by about $2.2 million. Our expenditures exceeded by $600,000. A lot of that was rising cost of materials, fuel, service, those type of things. And then, of course, the supply chains things that we purchased out of budget. But we do project it to end in surplus, and you can see there in the table on the FY22 projections, revenues over expenditures, that we are going to end, or at least we project in about $1.9 million. We do anticipate that's probably conservative. Sales tax numbers, that looks at sales tax if we remain flat for the remaining 3 months. So we do believe that that $1.9 million is a conservative number. So proposed budget for the general fund on 23. We add new positions, we get the items that is needed for all of our operations. We continue the same level of service for all of those departments in the general fund. The revenues are expected to continue to grow. We projected growth in just valuations is anticipated to continue. Sales tax continues to go strong, and of course, development. We don't see necessarily a slowdown in development at this point. As you saw, I sent out an email about some of the things with the railroad that can have huge impacts to the economy if it does go through. We continue to look at those changes in the economy. And just as a reminder, with any budget, if we see anything like that major that happens, we can adjust and will adjust in mid-budget year to accommodate some of those things that happen. The graph or the table that I would just point your direction to is, while you see the revenues high, much higher than they are projected, and expenditures higher, you see that revenues over expenditures in a deficit about $1.2 million. The ending fund balance is something that we look at, and you'll see that the projected proposed FY23 budget is still higher than what we had recommended the original budget in FY22. So because of the strong revenues and the strong growth, there is still a trend in the positive direction. The FY23 is projected to end with a 68% reserve. Just a reminder, we are required to have a 25% reserve, but we'd like to stay strong in all our funds. Property tax revenue, this budget does take into account or assumes that the tax rate would remain the same to bring in the same revenue as we did this current year with the $5,000 over that amount, which does assume that we're going to adopt the de minimis tax rate calculation. And so if you remember that there's several options when adopting the tax rate. One option is a no new revenue tax rate, which basically would mean for us, since our evaluations are continuing to grow, that tax rate to bring in the same amount would have to drop. In this budget, we did factor in the option that the legislature gives us in order for growing cities like ours to be able to bring in at least $500,000 more than what we did this previous year in order to help compensate for that growth and those needs that we have. And so that's what we're assuming in this budget. We haven't calculated the tax rate or the right tax rate yet. We haven't received the certified valuation estimates as of yet. We anticipate to receive those in late July. Yeah, so we can get really to the tax rate. It's important really to look at not necessarily that number. It's what we anticipate to bring in as a revenue. So in graph form, here just shows kind of a historical of where we are at and what the trend is. So you can see the trend really for revenues in the general fund have been going up, even stemming into the COVID years. FY21, that was the winter storm, and that FY22 budget versus our projection, even the projection that we show here, I think is still a conservative amount. But we anticipate those revenues to be probably higher than what we are showing here. Sales tax, here's one for sales tax going all the way back to 2015. Again, that 14.8 for FY22, that is assuming that the next 3 months remain flat compared to last year. Year to date, our sales tax collections are about almost to 21% over last year. So we haven't seen with sales tax collections under 10%. So it's been very, very strong so far. Property tax values, the trend is continuing to go up. And our expenditures there, again, a lot of that is higher because of the one-time expenditures that we're proposing in this budget. So we take a snapshot and we look at the big three departments, the biggest portions of the budget. You see there the police department, as you would anticipate, that personnel does account for most of their budget. Fire department, the same thing, their equipment needs and things like that. That's why they're a little bit higher. But just as you would think in public works operations, the purchasing of equipment, materials, fuel does outpace what our needs for personnel. So going into the new asks or requests for the FY23 proposed in this budget and with our supplementals, we broke this up into which department, what it is, and then if it's a one-time or a reoccurring expense. And so our personnel is going to be reoccurring, and then those projected amounts. Election equipment, permits and inspections, tough books for inspectors. This is where we're continuing to push and get more automated. You'll see further down that we're requesting software for work orders for public works, but also to track permits. This would automate a lot of what we do right now manually to get permits done, reported and tracked and issued. And so I think that it would save a lot of staff time by going more automated. So that's the request for tough books. They do not have those now. And engineering and planning, there's where you see the assistant city engineer request, the updates to the thoroughfare plan and comp plan, zoning update. In IT, with all these new personnel, we've got new computers, ClickShare devices. That's to modernize our technology in our meeting conference rooms, budget software like we talked about, The content manager, Doug, you can probably give a little bit more detail on that.
The size of our database in the Unicode application, made it for it needs to be upgraded to a new level of database, basically, so that's just a project.
Public Works permitting software, that is a one-time / occurring. We'll have maintenance costs with any of these softwares, but the startup is pretty high dollar. Network switches for Doug, I don't know what he uses them for. In police, all of the different personnel items that we have are listed there. Additional body cameras for all the new people, their uniforms, new additional to the fleet, patrol car, and then you'll see there the upgrades to the Malone lot with the evidence lot. It's right here at $200,000 coming out of the general fund. We are also utilizing funds from the police seizure fund that you'll see later. There's a healthy balance there, and we can utilize it for this expenditure. So we're going to use that to supplement the general fund. Fire, the majority of theirs is going to be reimbursed by the ESD with their new engine to supply that station, their gear, and obviously the personnel needed. The rest of the departments in Public Works, we've got an additional construction inspector, obviously the truck in the garage. We have a turf tray. What that is that it's a attachment that goes with our lift. So it safely picks up our zero-turn mowers, the smaller equipment, so they can lift it instead of using just the car lift. So that's an upgrade there. Mowers, ATVs, utility ATVs that we use a lot. Park Master Plan, the Wayne Stovall light replacement, that continues that program to upgrade the lights at the Little League to LED lights. And that is in conjunction with the Little League. They pay for half of that. Rock screen, that's to help for the Public Works and Street Department. Brush chipper, that's a new piece of equipment that we have. And then going into facilities, you'll see there a lot of HVAC upgrades needed for the community center, city hall, police department, in order to house a lot of our folks or the new people that are proposed cubicle build outs for those people, customer service build outs for the front of Public Works to make more room to add an additional person, and those type of things, and remodels for our facilities. Any questions on supplements?
I do, David. Do we have any money funded for a sound system for our building? And the reason I'm asking is when we had the meeting with the state and all the people showed up, I thought it was a very embarrassing moment for the city when people in the back couldn't even hear.
Right.
Because we didn't even have a sound system. And I thought that we should at least have some better sound system over there, because I do foresee us having more meetings in the near future for us over there.
Right. Well, and that there, because there is, and Doug, you might go into detail, there is a projector, there is a sound system there. That day it did not work. And so there is major components there that haven't been, they're not that old. And so there's connection issues there that need to be addressed. So I agree with you. And it's one of the priorities to really fix a lot of our technical issues, because we have them here in this building, we have them there. The community center, I think there's a lot of bugs worked out there, but there's different issues that seem to just continue to pop up, but those can be addressed in the base budget, because we do have those maintenance and operations for the existing items. So yes, we do need to.
We already have
those
that this year.
Yes, we
So
do
why not,
have,
let's get it fixed.
we can, yes, sir.
Let's not wait until this next budget. Let's get it fixed. If we got the money and we've got the ability to get it done.
Well, what about, is there going to be any increase in the sound system in the depot area? that in conjunction with our radio station are playing music down there and events or festivals, or is that anywhere, is that just part of parks? The radio upgrades?
Yes, we talked about putting it, so it's not in supplementals, that we anticipate funding through the ARP funds.
Upgrades, okay.
So that budget still hasn't, council hasn't decided how to divvy up, but that's where we looked at potentially being able to fund it out of there.
Okay. And the ESD 15, that's just switching fire to ESD 15, their budget, fire budget went down and the projection is 300% more.
No, so the funding for the.
Explain the ESD
Yes, ma'am.
15 cost.
So the way we approach the fire service, it's a more of a regional approach. So there is going to be, once Station 4 is built, 2 stations outside of the city limits in the ESD district. So those, we contract with the ESD to fully fund those 2 operations, those 2 fire stations. And then we have 2 fire stations within the city limits, and that is funded through general fund.
Until the 2 stations, that's why it went from 996 to $3 million budgeted this year for total ESD 15 outlay.
It looks like there's a $900,000.
Yes,
Right, but that's still
Still fun.
from $1 million to $3 million.
because they've added 9 personnel.
So that-
And so that's about $1 million
And that's it?
worth of just personnel.
So that's the increase in personnel, wages, and all the benefits doubled, adding the personnel. Okay,
And so we revised the way we look at the reimbursement model, because there is 2 on the outside and 2 in the inside. And then in the inside, we've traditionally had some expenditures that are just inherently more inside the city limits, but it's more evened out. And so what we've done is we've looked at all of our expenses and tried to more equitably distribute those cost reimbursement to where the ESD now truly is closer to 50-50. Or at least that's what's proposed. As you see here on the general fund, we added up the one-time expenditures versus the reoccurring. And you'll see the majority of the funds here programmed for supplementals is much higher on the one-time. And that is a good thing, because it is really tapping into those reserves just for a one-time expense. Going into the enterprise fund revenues, we are looking at exceeding revenues for this current year by $1.1 million. Expenditures were right behind that with about $850,000. A lot of that was because of the rising costs that we saw, but also because of the growth and development, the purchasing of new meters and gas meters and things like that outpaced our projections for the expenditure, which we do recoup some of those out of those revenues. Supply chain, again, was one of the things that hit us there. But for the end of 22, we are looking at a 70% reserves for the fund as a whole.
At the end of 23, you're looking at a 55%, correct?
Yes, sir. And so going into FY 23, because we are looking at a lot of one-time expenditures, the fund balance is projected to be at 55% versus 70% that is projected for this current year. And you'll see there that the ending balance for FY 23 versus what we had originally budgeted for 22.
David, I have a question. With our current impact fee that we're charging, or our impact fees, are we at least breaking even or making money on new developments when we go out and set those meters and the cost of doing that? Are we at least covering ourselves, or are we adjusting our impact fees or getting ready to do an impact fee study or anything?
Yes, sir. And so for both of those. So there is on the master fee schedule, our costs that we charge for taps and all of those items. We are currently in the process of reviewing all of those. And I can tell you right now that we are not recovering lot of the costs have grown so fast compared to the last time they were adopted that we do need to adjust those and go up. On the impact fees, it's the same thing. The cost to build the capital projects that the impact fees are based on has skyrocketed so much that it does require us to go back, refine those construction costs for those capital projects, and then redo the calculation for the impact fees. We did, or council adopted, whenever we did the impact fees back, when we adopted those, for lack of a better term, we did leave some funds on the table. We adopted something that was kind of in the middle versus others. So to kind of fill in that gap, we do anticipate bringing to the council to adopt the highest rate from that rate study or that impact fee study. Go ahead and adopt that now while we work on the update on the impact fees to try to kind of cover that hole that we have.
Because if I'm not mistaken, Magnolia just redid theirs and they aggressively went up on theirs.
Yes.
And are those increases or anticipated increases factored in here?
They're not.
So how are we gonna get them in? Is that gonna be a?
That probably will show up in the projections for next year. Because we have to finish the
Master fees.
master fee schedule update analysis to what, that way I could recommend to you what those costs will want to recover. And so we can implement those at any time during the budget year.
So it'll
And-
just show up as an increased revenue
Correct.
over
Just
what was budgeted.
How long will it take for you to build the capital recovery fees?
So on the impact fees, we do not anticipate to take that long because we do have, kind of the stopgap for right now to adopt what that was before. Go ahead and adopt that now and then start the update to the impact fees. And then the other one for the master fee schedule for all of those other fees, we anticipate by probably December, we could have a proposal in front of council.
What I don't want to see us do though is raise our impact fees to a certain level and then 3 months later come back and jack them up again. And that's kind of what you're talking about doing.
That definitely can happen.
When was the last time the impact fees were raised?
I believe it was 2019.
19.
19? I can remember, I just remember what year it was.
So it was just before COVID. So
Yeah,
and
that's right.
so those impacts or the inflation really started with when the economy was, and so there we've seen a huge increase in construction costs. So to just give you an example, the wastewater treatment plant for the south plant, just to expand it, so basically double its size, we were looking at a $12-15 million construction cost. Now projections are 50 million for the same construction. And so those costs are absolutely much higher.
So David, let me ask you this. Somebody comes in, they've got a project, they've been working with y'all, and y'all quote them a certain impact fees for their stuff, and then all of a sudden they decide they're gonna go ahead with their project, and 3 months later they get hit with, oh, it's gone up. Will we see that happen potentially?
No, sir. No, it's kind of like vested rights. Whatever they came in at, and that's what we quoted, that's what they're locked in at.
That's fine. I just don't want to see people complaining to us that, oh, you jacked our, impact fees up.
Right.
Well, I would imagine like on a single individual project, we do that, but like if it's a residential subdivision, until they permit the actual building of that home, they're not quoted a rate.
You're exactly
Correct.
right. Not until they come in to pull out a permit.
Right.
So it's based on permit, so it could vary from home to home in a subdivision.
It should,
Yes.
because it'll take time to build them out.
Correct.
Just make sure we're upfront with our developers that that's going to occur. Maybe they need their permits for several houses at a time.
Yeah, the trend with these home builders is they'll come in with bunches of about 20 permits at a time. All right. So what is included in the enterprise proposed budget is a utility rate increase of 6% for both the water and the sewer. We have not raised any water rates for, I don't even know, since I've been here. The last rate increase that we've done was for sewer, and that was, I think in 19. Yeah. And so to keep up with the growth and all of the anticipated expenditures, this budget does anticipate a 6% rate increase. And then, of course, right now, the Regional Water Authority's fee is still at 4.6. We've looked on their website to see what the anticipated increase is. They haven't posted anything yet, but I would expect an increase. That's been pretty much the trend to increase again in FY23. So our revenues here, the enterprise is a difficult one. So for 22 projection, since it is heavily weather related, those, in order to remain conservative, you'll see that we're projecting a $14.1 million revenue. That we're trying to keep this flat, but for this current year, I do anticipate us going much higher than the 14.3. You'll see in FY 2021, we had an increase, and that was because of the winter storm, we did a transfer from capital projects to help fund that $2.7 million hit that we had in the gas fund for the gas expenditure. That's why you see that one jump up.
David, TDC is going to be finishing paying off their debt this year on one and then on another, but I don't see any involvement for 2023. Is that just if we need it, or is that going to come in during the bond debt and assistance from TDC? They have paid off a couple of their
Correct.
debts on the enterprise fund.
Yes, ma'am. And so we'll cover that in the debt service fund,
Okay.
because all of the debt, those debt payments from the EDC go to the debt service fund, which is here just in a minute, but we did lay out what those requests were for the TEDC. That doesn't limit us to those requests. That's what we anticipate. If that can be a request that they pay for a portion or a part of the debt service for any issuances that we do for infrastructure.
But for the enterprise fund revenue, we don't have anticipate
Correct.
anything in from
No.
TDC this year.
Right.
Okay.
So our expenditures there, as you can see that, again, one-time expenditures are recommended here, and that's why you see a higher amount for this proposed budget. Our supplementals for enterprise fund. Utility rate study, they fund portion of the facility needs assessment because it does involve public works. I haven't requested an environmental coordinator. The primary function of the environmental coordinator is to be more on the code compliance side in the water code. A lot of our grease trap issues, our backflow preventers, things like that. A program is truly needed. We expend a considerable amount of money dealing with grease issues in main lines. And so really to keep track and to do compliance on that end with our restaurants and our growing commercial sector, this position would really be the liaison between the city and compliance with the commercial side, but also with TCEQ. Our requirements with TCEQ is always increasing with the permitting or the permit amendment that we have to do to expand the wastewater treatment plant. There's going to be a lot of back and forth with the constituents that we're going to be required to treat. There is potential to add other things that we don't do now. And so really for somebody to be on top of that and dealing with the TCEQ, I believe that it is going to be necessary. And this does sets us up for any future industrial users that come in to the city. So we could be looking at a pre-treatment program for those that discharge industrial waste to us to make sure we don't exceed some of our limits in our permit at the wastewater treatment plants. But it also adds the capacity there to start, if some of these projects come into fruition, for example, a reuse project with a with an industry that has a high water usage, this will roll right into that, and we could start all of those permitting processes and get that going. So I do believe that we're at a good point now with current needs and with future needs, that the environmental coordinator would be a essential function. Because of the failing meters that we have and the growth that we have right now, and the supply chain issues to get transmitters for our current meters, we are needing a contract meter service. So we currently do utilize a contractor to go out and collect reads to try to help take the burden off our current utility crews, because at one point we had all of our crews out reading meters. Now we don't have that. We're able to accomplish that with a contractor to just go out there and read meters. We see that for the next at least year to need that before we start receiving our supply in water meters and transmitters. We talked about a customer service coordinator that is paid out of utility billing, which is the enterprise fund, stores connectors for our fire hydrants, to continue that program and fund that. Updates to the water master plan, well maintenance. So we identified well 6, but really this is a rotation to pool our wells on a yearly basis to make sure the casing's good, to make sure that the seals are all good, so we don't have an emergency type situation with a well fade for our water supply. So that's an ongoing program. There you see the truck for the new crew, mini dump, and then the personnel needed a crew chief and 2 servicemen to go with that crew, but also recommends a utilities technician. Those really are the ones that are checking their wells, their plants, and is the face when we have any customer request for work orders. Continuing on, that we've got some improvements to the facilities at the North Wastewater Treatment Plant. Continued to implement SCADA to kind of automate a lot of those functions and get reads on a real-time basis. Wastewater master plan, the permit renewals needed for any expansion, and they are set to expire, I believe, next year. So we have to submit for the renewal. A big item here is upgrades to electrical. That is a big need, so we don't have any failures in our lift stations and have potential overflows, but also the generator replacement at the south plant. That one did give us trouble during the winter storm, and so it is proposed to be replaced. It is met its useful life. It's about 20 years old now. And then we do separate between all of them. So you see there in gas, some of the same things, conversion to senses, SCADA, leak detection items, and equipment. For one-time expenditures, about $1.7 million, and reoccurring of $500,000.
Quick question. How close are you to getting all the hydrants fitted with source connections? This budget is approximately
2 or 3 years.
So should that be a recurring item instead of a one-time item?
We list it as a one-time because we're not obligated to continue. If need be, we can utilize other revenues or other sources, for example, a grant or something like that. That's why I don't put it as a reoccurring. It's not like a personnel where once we commit, we're on the hook for those things. This is a one-time thing is what I considered it.
David, we're 400, what'd you say, 450?
400.
400 out. Have we noticed them increasing in cost considerably? Why not budget the years and get the 400 of them, and get it done?
We absolutely could. Yes, sir.
I mean, to me, why do we keep kicking the can down the road when the costs keep going up? If we can do some of this stuff, let's get them done. I mean, how much more are we talking about?
Just to make sure we have cushion for
That's fine.
the event that we have.
That's fine. I mean, 25,000, if that gives you the ability to buy some more of them for your newer hydrants, or are you stuck at all these hydrants will have them?
Right.
Okay. Well, like I said, Guys, it's $25,000. To me, it's a no-brainer because it's gonna cost us $50,000 next year.
What is it?
The automatic connectors on your hydrants, you have a quick connect.
That Chrome thing?
Yeah, so it's aluminum actually, but so you don't have to go in and spend a lot of time trying to make your connection up. It saves you time. It's a spin and you're done.
It's a
So-
quarter turn.
Yeah, it's a quarter turn and you're done. And to me, a fire grows in size. It doubles itself every minute. So if it's a 1 foot by 1 foot, 1 minute, it's 2 by 2 the next minute, 4 by 4 the next, 16 by 16, going up the chain. So to me, $25,000 is in our total budget is pittance.
I agree. We'll check the math because it was higher when we first, and that's why I said, let's break it up. But
Well,
so
even if
we'll-
it's,
we just need to make sure.
even if it's $40,000 to me, it's.
We'll bring it back with an update in a second.
Okay.
David, I'm a newbie. On your water wells, and everything, what kind of pumps are in those?
Submersible.
Okay. They're gotta be huge. So do we have it built in there for, you said maintenance, but what happens when one goes out? Because those things gotta cost a lot of money.
They do, and so that's why we program 100,000. If it's truly just maintenance, we're not gonna spend 100,000.
Okay.
So we will spend a portion. That 100,000 is in there because if we need to replace any screens, any of
Right.
those type of things, then it does mitigate that cost. So instead of trying to go with the worst case scenario and let's say budget 150 or whatever,
Right.
and keep that in a budget suspended and take it out of fund balance, we do the majority of it. So basically funding maybe 80% of that anticipated cost. We had a motor go out and a pump replacement for Pine Street. That total cost, of course, it was dollars back then, was about $120,000. And so that's why we recommend doing 100. We don't anticipate having to use that, but in case we do, the majority of it is budgeted.
And you do pull them yearly.
The rotation, because we've got five wells, six with Baker Street, which we capped, but 5 wells, so it's a 5-year rotation to pull it
Yeah.
and TV it on a rotation of 5 years.
Check the screens and everything.
So how do we fill in 5 back up since we kept that well? We just get it off of another well, while we've got our plumbing done?
So for those that haven't been on council, so the Baker Street well, that tank that we have there, there's a well that fed that tank. That well was high in H2S gas. So it was perfectly safe to drink, but it had odor and taste issues, and it was constant. And so it was one of those where let's just take it offline. And of course, it does affect our capacity to a certain extent, but as you see, even in these drought conditions, we're still within 60%, even on high demand.
Because I guess you can't use
Sorry.
chlorination.
Right, chlorination just disinfects, it doesn't address the H2S. So we had that high, or that taste and odor issues with it.
It was nasty.
Oh, I know. You're gonna come see my private well.
So the new well that's proposed is, according to our water model, shows it to be, we should locate it kind of in the southeast corner of town. So somewhere Business Park area, somewhere in that area is where the additional well is anticipated to be. Which would then be their take point for the connection to the regional water authority.
And that's away from most drilling sites and everything in that area you're talking about.
Yes, drilling sites as in,
Oil well, gas well, drilling sites.
yeah, I don't know of
Not
any
really.
active ones around in that area, so it should, yes, would be outside of those. But once we get to trying to do a site selection, we still have to do test wells to see what quality we're looking at.
Thank you.
Now, going into the debt service for FY '23. In this fund, the fund balance is extremely healthy. And so really this fund, the revenues and the money that's in this can only be used to pay off debt. So with this healthy fund balance that we have, it really needs to be used for debt. And so our anticipation here is to, when we do issue a debt issuance, for example, this $20 million, is to front load that debt. So that our high payments would be at the beginning of the payoff period, and buy down or pay using those reserves, which will mitigate any rate or any tax increase that may come from it, because then we will allow growth to happen. So our tax base will continue to grow. Those revenues will then catch up to that debt service that we're going to add. And so basically that's how the plan is for this debt service, is to spend down, because we really do need to spend down that reserve that we have in this fund, because it can be only used for debt. And so this is a good opportunity to use that with a issuance of debt. So here you see kind of the revenue that we have. Back in 20, we did a refunding. Was that a refunding in 2019? Or that was a new issuance? So that was a new issuance. That's why you see these revenues shoot up, 9.8 million. And then in the next year, we had a refunding. That's why we added that 5.8 for there. But the rest of it truly is the revenues that we get from property tax. Again, 22 is, I think, a conservative amount. We do probably anticipate to receive a little bit more.
Do we have any projection or estimate of what we're going to pay in interest on this debt? I mean,
It's a good
Catherine, that's
question
kind of a
about-
Catherine question, I
Yes.
guess, especially with interest rates going up another 0.75 soon. Do we have any idea? And also, how does, on our bond rating, and I know that they look at fund balances, percentages, when they analyze bond rating, and we're at AA right now, correct?
AA
bond?
plus.
AA
in-
plus?
In S&P, and then in Moody's, we are at AA2.
Okay. Do we have any feel as to, now that we're lowering our fund balances down to the 40, 50, 60% level on some things, but 56, 65 was the lowest, which is double the 25 I saw. How is that going to affect our chances to have our bond rating upped again? And also our ability, what interest rate we're going to pay on bonds if we were to issue more debt?
So as she looks at the potential.
And you don't have to tell me now.
Interest rate. No, but that is a very good question, because when we did the bond surveillance for the refunding, we had a bond surveillance that when we got upgraded to AA2 for Moody's, that was specifically an item that they talked about.
Fund balance.
So they talked about the strong, healthy fund balance, that it's way above our policy of 25%. So as long as we stay above that 25%, they consider that a very strong, healthy fund balance. So that dropping from 68% to 55 is not going to affect our bond rating whatsoever. In fact, one of the things that when I talked to the bond surveillance person with Moody's, he specifically asked, is the city willing to issue any debt? And so the answer was yes, because then they said the concern or the question is because with a growing community, there's going to be needs in order to meet those demands. And so is the city willing to meet those demands and get what they need in order to continue to operate in a very sound manner? And so when we answered, yes, that is anticipated in order to address these issues, that debt is something that is being looked at and is going to be considered. They consider that a very strong management piece by the council and for management to propose an issuance for the purpose of, for the needs and to add that, because they said you absolutely have the capacity to issue issue debt. So as for a management strength, in order to be able to issue that, they consider that very strong.
Okay.
So this plan or this projection or recommendation follows right in line with what the bond agencies are wanting to see.
Okay, so going closer to the 25% will not hurt us in our bond rating. Will there, is that what you're saying?
Correct,
Okay,
because
so-
now we're not just holding on to rates funding or tax funding, we're actually using for what their intended use is.
Okay.
But we still have to make sure on the debt service side that we have all of those required ratios or coverage ratios for
For our
those.
bond covenants. So there's the requirements in the bond covenants that we have to meet in our fund balance, but we don't need to necessarily go in excess for the debt service fund. It doesn't operate like the other funds, like the 25% of expenditures. Debt service is a little bit different. It's all based off of the bond covenant. So as long as we're meeting those, the rating agencies should not have an issue with lowering it.
And some of those are more like 40% or of.
No, we're even at the projected balance for the fiscal year 23 budget that we have at 4.2 million. We're probably well in excess. I have not gone into each of the bond covenants for the issuances,
Okay,
but I also have not seen a fund balance that's high in a debt service fund.
okay,
So if that gives you any comfort, we're good.
okay.
Yes, we're very, very healthy in the debt service fund.
What happens if the value of property starts de-escalating? What are we gonna do? Because we're based off of a certain tax rate. And the economy goes to the can, then what do we do?
So what ends up happening, and that's why it's important to look at how much revenue we're bringing in. So based on no new revenue and if valuations start to decline, the tax rate then goes up to bring in the same amount. That's where the council then makes the decision to try to mitigate that increase needed to do. And so that's when we, on a worst case scenario, if that were to happen, then to trim down the budget to meet those needs. That's when we start doing it. But the tax rate really is a function of the revenue that is being brought in.
That's at 33 cents you were talking
Right now it's at 33 cents, which is in two pieces. One is for M&O and one is for the tax rate. I mean, for the debt. Here's what we're talking about on the debt service fund. So you'll see the expenditures for 2023. It is, you see it higher and then it drops because in 2023, we do retire one of those bonds. Do you remember which one it was? Is it the 13?
2013 refunding.
The 2013 refunding. So this upcoming year would be the last year for that debt payment for that bond issuance. So then it drops down. That's where we gain some capacity for 2024. For this first year, we plan to utilize some of that fund balance to even out so we don't see that impact on the tax rate at all. Here is the same thing. The general obligation refunding series of 2013 would be pay off this upcoming 2023 budget year. With the continued growth of appraised values, the amount that we'll be bringing in into the debt service fund or that portion of the tax rate is projected to go up because not only is the valuations going up, but our tax base is growing. So you have the Lovitz and you have the new houses coming in, that tax base is continuing to grow. And so those revenues go into the fund and will pay for part of that, that issuance that we're recommending. And then again, front load this issuance so that way we can utilize that fund balance to pay it down, which the goal is to minimize the impact to the property tax rate as much as possible. And then here's the list of the projects we've identified at this point. The recoding and that's needed for Pine Street, the East Plant water supply, that's the first phase. To complete a water well, you're looking at probably around $16 million for a complete project for a water well. This will get us engineering, acquire the property before a lot of this property gets encumbered with development. The easement acquisition on Telge, that is actually $1.5 million, not 750. We had it separated between water and sewers. That's why that was a typo. And then the lift station on 2920. And that does give us some contingency for anything that we might see for the $20 million.
So that just doesn't cover what we had planned. That gives us something in the future before we have to worry about going through debt again. How long would this last with projected growth that we have?
Well, as we've discussed, was that we do anticipate coming back with a program after we truly to get this year started with these absolute needs, to get these master plans done so we can then see what capital projects come out of those master plans, prioritize those, break those up into a yearly program, and then see what the capacity is for I won't say sustainable, but a efficient way to increase any of the revenues to pay for that program. That's why we're recommending, let's get these done for this upcoming year. And then in the next budget cycle, we'll definitely go through the program.
Okay.
We can take a break before we can.
Yeah.
if you like.
Maybe take a 5-minute break. No, that's hurting his back. So. Okay, David, if you'd like to continue?
Yes, ma'am. So I entertain any questions you may have on those items that we talked about.
Can you give us a copy of your PowerPoint presentation when
Absolutely.
you
sir.
have a chance?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, we were out of the room when we decided that.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I just have some general questions and please excuse me in advance because I'm used to dealing with body parts and not lines of data like this, so I'm totally ignorant. So the supplemental things that y'all been putting up there, is that being presented in a different way this time? Or if we have supplementals in the past, they were just buried in things?
No, if you look at towards the end of the budget book,
Yeah,
there is a listing of supplementals, and typically what we do is all of the supplementals that are recommended in this budget, and then there's also a cut supplementals. So that way, council gets to see what are the items that I told the department heads, no, we're not gonna fund this year, potentially maybe next year, or it's a program that they don't look at. Because it could be something that council talked about it in the departments, that's how they came up with it. So if it's, you want to revive any of those or any additional ones to what we have presented. But we've presented the budgets in the past with supplementals, because supplementals are absolutely brand new in conjunction to the base budgets.
yeah, so I just hadn't recalled seeing them and so they are part of the budget. They are just highlighted to say, these are the additions and this is what they're for.
Right.
Okay, so with that in mind, I would like to turn to page 2 on the general fund. And I just have some general questions on here. And this is to give me a basis of where we are and where we're going. So my first question up on in the revenues section under other revenue, what is other revenue?
Transfers from, okay, let me look here, revenues, other revenue. I'm going to pull up the actual line item description.
I assume
There's
there's
a
something we're
transfers.
charging and we have increased our rates on, or they have, or in
I believe
association
that,
with.
so the EDC administration fee that we charge them $25,000, that's part of that.
Sale of city property.
So when we auction vehicles off, that's other revenue that goes into the general fund.
Okay. So it was twice the budgeted rate, what we're projecting we're going to get in 22. And then it's even stronger into 23. Can you account for that? Is that?
So the explanation for 22 was that we budgeted, I think, $40,000 for our auction items. It actually came in at 130
Okay.
because of the gyros. We
Oh.
didn't,
Oh,
so at the beginning of the year, we didn't anticipate.
Got it.
auctioning them
Okay.
off, and we did this time. So
That's a big deal. Yeah.
we did get, I think it was 70,000 for both. Is that right?
Another new item in that for other revenue is the credit card fees, that 3% that we've implemented.
Okay, that's
starting
where it
November
shows up.
1st.
Great.
That
That's why you
was
see
not
it
previously
this-
budgeted.
Yes.
Okay, so to me, the devil's in the detail, and that's, so
Absolutely.
that's, this
Good
is why I'm asking these questions. So moving down to expenditures under fire. Explain to me the difference between projection in 22 and the actual decrease in 23 budget.
Yes.
Where
That
are
is
you
the funding model that we're looking at or proposing with the ESD. So remember when we talked about before, 2 stations in city limits, 1 station in the ESD, now with the new station, it truly is more of a 50-50. So administration should be more of the 50-50 model. A lot of the maintenance items, we used to pay a percentage of it out in the ESD. Now it's all, everything that's in the ESD. So you'll see there's a reduction on the city side and an increase. So it's a, go ahead.
We purchased $325,000 spot on in FY 22.
Oh,
If
that's
you're
it.
looking- Yeah, so that's why FY 22, if you're looking at what is Aspire,
Yes.
Yes,
that's why FY 22 is higher.
okay, so that's where that shows
Yeah.
up. And the,
Okay.
under ESD number 15, the significant increase there is because of that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then how about Public Works Administration, the difference between those two columns? Going from 83 to 272. It's just the next line down.
Mhm.
Is that, we're hiring somebody, or
A construction inspector is in public works admin.
is
as a
that
new
the
position.
environmental guy too?
That one should be in enterprise.
Oh, okay.
So it is the construction inspector. There's,
What else?
but the truck, oh yeah, that's right. The truck is new, so it's not the fleet fund, so it is straight out of here.
David, I believe I asked also, just a couple of meetings ago, why the folks out here don't have laptops. And is it something they need to be having so that they can respond to us or whatever during meetings? Or is that included in here anywhere?
Yeah, so on the IT space budget, there is just for replacement, and so they'll have desktops there, and so we need to just convert them. That desktop will go somewhere else, so it's part of a replacement program.
Okay.
So it's in the base
That
budget.
was going to be one of my questions.
So we usually let people either have a desktop or a laptop. Laptop, obviously, you can pick up and carry with you and stuff, and if you need that, you get that. Desktop run a little faster and are a little easier, like when we were doing remote work from home and stuff.
So you can remote into your desktops from home. What computer do they use at home? So does that not open them up to any kind of search of their computers because you're doing city work on private?
There's no city data on your home computer. All the data stays in our buildings.
So it's a virtual desktop.
Okay, so I just don't want somebody to have somebody come in and say, okay, now we want to have your home computer for you to be looked at for, God and everybody to see. I just don't want that to occur.
And it's a protected VPN.
Operate
Right.
your desktop from your home and it just displays.
It's a
on the
VPN.
screen. You're still running the processor memory and hard drive in your office.
Yep. That's fine. Like I said, I just want to make sure that we don't invade somebody's home privacy. That's something I don't want us to be doing.
Okay, and going back to my nitpicking here, on streets, what's the big change? Oh, that 3-person crew
And a truck.
and a truck, I got it, okay, and engineering and planning, same thing as this,
And then,
got it.
and then the plan.
Okay, so bear with me here just a little bit. I noticed in going through the departments that I guess we're doing some different accounting, but on all of them, we zeroed out the vacation pay, sick pay, emergency pay. What's that? What's going on?
That's a financial reporting change that I implemented. So we
Figured.
don't need to necessarily show people taking vacation pay. We can include it with
With
salaries.
salaries, okay.
Correct. And then we also added a auto allowance under the personnel section.
Yeah, that was my next question is what's that? So you added an auto allowance? Tell me
It
about
was
that.
in a different account, but I moved it where all the personnel items, because it's a benefit to employees to receive.
In that department.
Correct. So now it's in the personnel grouping.
So we can truly show how much it costs to
Yeah,
run that department.
because it came up from the bottom to under supplies, which I always thought it was a little funky under supplies. So, okay. All right, that explains that. And let's see, and then under mayor and council department, professional services other, what is that? 100% increase.
So what we've used that line item before, we have department head assessments, strategic planning, that's what we'll pay a facilitator, any trainings for the council. that type of stuff.
Okay. All right, and then under city secretary, the professional services other, which is down the page. Go for it.
Yep, there was a supplemental, the conversion of archived records. So that is a company that comes in and kind of gets us into the digital
Okay,
world. So that was a $22,000 supplemental.
okay. And I know we're doing something with election services. What are we doing?
Purchasing election equipment.
Okay. Is it similar to what the county uses by Pray Not?
It will be the same equipment that Harris County is using.
Damn, okay. Why?
It meets the state
Yeah,
mandated
there you go.
regulations. for
Knew the
election
state was
equipment.
mixed in there
Our
somewhere.
current equipment does not meet state law.
Okay, we'll just have to get rid of some state representatives.
Okay, so under information systems, under wages full-time, are we decreasing people?
Where'd you go to, John?
Page 11. Under wages full-time. It's top of page.
We had an employee retired in this fiscal year. And we were starting this fiscal year, so you've probably seen the change in the.
And so they're coming in at a lower rate.
Probably that's what you're
That's
seeing.
the plan is. Okay. Okay. And then how about phone and internet services on the repairs and maintenance? Why is that going down? I would think we'd be going up.
We actually switched out a lot of our landlines that were used for like the websites. and
Oh, yeah.
stations. And those copper landlines are a lot more expensive than our FirstNet cellular service. that we
Okay.
get through AT&T.
All right, so we're getting a return on investment right there. All right. And then the auto allowances that was already explained. What is a non-departmental department?
So a lot of the, we have to have attorneys. I don't know why. They're paid out of non-departmental because it's not. Sorry.
No, they're paid out.
Oh, it's.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Legal is a separate.
I thought they
department.
were paid out
I'm
of
sorry.
legal.
You're right. They just, legal, really just. Anyway, go ahead.
So what is
What non-departmental?
non-departmental?
A lot of it is all the general fund employee benefit costs. So the
right.
insurance is not in each specific department for the general fund. It's all in the non-departmental.
Oh,
That's something we'll be looking at changing.
can we change the name? That's kind of. Under police department,
Yeah.
page 14. So why, with all the increase in fuel and prices, why is that number down? And more police on the streets, I hear. It went from 110 to 90 on fuel, oil, and lubricants.
6108,
Oh, we're working remote.
page 14, 6108.
We're gonna start moving to Priuses.
Oh,
Way to go.
we're gonna overload the grid.
We're gonna start flipping breakers at City Hall.
I think you're right, Kristen. I think that one. That was, when we did those projections, that was before the big price
We
increase.
need to look at that, because
Also need to
You're
look at
exactly
it.
right. I don't know what prices are gonna be like, but I don't see them dropping anytime soon.
What about wages other than vacation, basic pay? Is that the same situation? we
That's
were in a
same
while ago,
thing.
That everything's gonna go up?
it's just an accounting thing. So, and other equipment maintenance down the page. Significant change from 185 to 12.
So the 185 for the projection for this year was the telex for dispatch system
Uh-huh.
that council approved last fall. That was
Okay.
$174,000.
Okay, and the 12, what's that? Just
The
additional.
12 is just regular.
Video
Maintenance of
equipment,
items.
radios, yeah. that kind of
Okay.
stuff.
All right, and on the next page, vehicle equipment, I assume that's for new squad cars going from 0 to 65.
Yes. That's
Okay.
a supplemental.
All
for-
right, and then moving on to municipal court, wages change from 145, 176. Is that bailiff or what is that?
We had a position that was in the budget but not funded. And so when Doug.
They were
refresh my memory.
volunteer?
No, that we just didn't fill that position because of COVID. The numbers and to be able to issue tickets were down, so we didn't fill it. So we didn't fund it. So now as it's coming back up, no, I take that back. That's not right. Drop for court.
Yeah, we did.
We did that, but it was funded.
I don't know, 6 months without filling that position because our
Correct.
workload had dropped so much, COVID and ticket writing that we decided to leave that position vacant for a while.
In this year?
Yes, current year.
2022.
Okay.
But so it was funded, so that increase in wait time and
Yeah, I think what you're seeing in 23 is the full, it's, because they're fully staffed now. So going into
Right.
23, you're seeing them fully staffed for the full year for the first time. since
COVID's back.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can we,
Yeah.
before you go any further, go back to your page 15.
Yeah.
Police department. Didn't we just agree that we were gonna purchase some license plate reading equipment? Is that in the 21-22 budget or is that the 22-23 budget?
thought we paid for that already,
yes, that was 22.
22,
Yeah.
so it doesn't show up here.
right?
Okay.
Okay, so we figured out what this is. So it's just that we didn't write a bunch of tickets, and so we didn't need that
Where is it?
person to administrate
Yeah.
okay,
If-
I'll
if-
buy that one.
If you go back, still, if you go back, we don't show that in the 22 projections.
Yeah,
We don't show the projection, the 22 for that equipment. We show radio equipment. 48,000, but we don't show anything for the readers.
The license plate reader stuff, it's part of the Axon camera package we bought. So the grant is just to turn the switch on. The equipment is already there built into the camera.
No, he's talking about, we budgeted a LPR
Yeah,
before, but I believe we paid that out of court technology. So it's not out of the,
so it'll be, it'll show the courts.
wrong department.
so we could look at, let's just check to see if court technology, that's where it was.
Mayor, how are we doing on time?
We got 20 minutes.
Yeah, we've got 20 minutes, so unless you want to take a break before council, then we have 5 minutes.
I just have a few more of these. Okay, so under fire department. So again, the fuel, oil and lubricants is significantly down over this year. So I think we need to look at that. So those machines are bigger than the police ones. Right?
Yes, and so they've done a good job to not be the first one to respond to medical calls.
Yeah.
when needed. So that, and then using the medic unit has helped, but.
But
I
when
agree
did we
with you.
stop that? We stopped that.
We stopped that. Probably 2 years ago.
possibility.
So-
So you're right. I don't disagree. We need to look
Okay,
at the.
we need to look at
number
that.
of years.
And then vehicular maintenance is significantly off. Wonder why. Down there at the
Oh, maintenance.
last section, 142 to 85. We're not gonna work on our trucks this year. We got good trucks and they don't need.
So one of the major expenditures we had to do was a replacement on an engine at the station. pile.
Yeah,
So we had to bump the budget in our projections by $27,000.
yeah,
That was one change. So there it is.
okay.
So we're hoping that's. a
So we're not
one-time-
anticipating that. Okay, that makes sense. All right. Just trying to figure that out. And the fire department doesn't get any banquets or anything this year. That went from 11 to 6, just wondered why that.
Yeah, no,
Joe, you get nothing. No party.
Moved for a single, all.
Oh, okay. All right, makes sense. And so under Public Works Admin, I assume the difference in the wages full-time is because we're hiring somebody,
the construction inspector.
construction guy,
Mhm.
okay? And under garage, why the decrease overall from 202 to 173?
In the total budget,
Yeah, is there something we should go back and look at? That cost increase?
that probably was,
Supplementals from this fiscal year.
Did we add a lift or bought a
it was
lift?
a
or-
code reader for the new vehicles that we funded last year and
Okay.
a wheel balancer.
Okay, and then under parks on page 25, under professional services other, a big jump from 7,500 to 157. The master plan, all those plans. Okay. All right, and streets, professional services, on page 26, 15 to 865. What are we doing there? Drainage and all those plans, okay. And, okay, assume we're hiring somebody there. Professional services engineering on page 29, 61 to 519.4. Is that a plan?
In engineering planning.
The comp plan and major thoroughfare plan update and the zone ordinance update.
All lumped into one. Okay, got it. Okay,
We can give you the breakdown of what we have. We have 300,000 for the comp plan and 150 for the zoning ordinance update.
that's all my nit. Just want to understand it.
Those are good questions.
I still haven't found my LPR.
2021, I believe it is, sir. I didn't buy an LPR last
Oh, 2021?
I remember.
2021, because that car was recommended transferred to the new car.
Yeah, but
We'll
we,
find it. We'll give you the year we budget.
okay, because I know that we had something just came up not too long ago about license plate readers and the cameras, and there was a capital outlay, and I just don't remember what that was or how much that was.
Here, in the recent,
Yeah,
yeah, that was so remember when we did the Axion body cams?
mhm.
And so that was a two-piece. One was for the body cams and one was for the car, in-car.
Okay,
And so we just applied for a grant to convert that car camera into an LPR. So now all of our car cameras are going to be LPRs if we get the grant.
so it doesn't show up in our budget. What
No.
happens if we don't get the grant? Then do we have to come back and do a budget adjustment because we're spending the money?
No, because we just won't do the conversion.
Oh,
We sure do need that, though.
yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. Why don't we go ahead and,
And that was tedious for the officer. I've ridden with you guys, sitting there, and if you had that license plate reader, man, you know what's clicking and going on right then instead of guessing. Or trying to type on your laptop, so.
Do we have, let's see, I only have one question. Catherine, is our auto allowance an accountable or non-accountable plan? Is it- Yeah, do they have to turn in receipts or is it just a set
No, it's a
amount on the
set amount.
W-2?
That position, certain positions receive.
Not accountable, okay. All right, is there anything, any other questions? on anything?
Monday night, I'll have some more questions. I'll be doing it via Zoom. Will this be open Zoom workshop?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Okay, because I want to be out next Monday, the 1st.
Yeah, well, that's the 28th.
And he'll be on the good stuff, so he'll have a lot of questions.
Yeah, our next workshop is August 1st, correct? At
Yes.
4 o'clock,
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
yeah.
Mine's August, yeah.
And you-
We'll zoom you in.
And so we need to see you and hear you.
That's right.
And it's okay if you go, oh, every now and then, it's okay. You just said
Don't
I'm
be-
that.
praying I'm not doing any of that.
Don't be in your nightie either.
Oh, man.
Or your backless
Wow.
hospital gown. Don't want to see
I'll-
that.
I'll-
Yeah.
You're gonna be Santa Claus pajamas.
Yeah, right.
Leave my footsies alone.
All right. Oh, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second,
Second.
okay, any discussion? I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, we are adjourned.